We're live.
Okay, very special treat today. We are live on the Craig Reed YouTube channel. We got Stephanie in the house. Stephanie, oh my God, Stephanie. No, not that Stephanie, the actual Stephanie, but the imitation Stephanie. Oh, the other Stephanie. Today we have a very special treat. We are going to be Stephanie. Yeah, Stephanie's here. Yeah, I'm here. I'm finally here. Really. We are going to be analyzing. What are we analyzing? A modern day debate, problem of evil, with Alex Malpass and Dr. Michael Brown. Now, we are on borrowed time because I'm in the car, hotspot, and the internet is down in my area. So if I mysteriously disappear, then you know that I don't even know. Does that even make sense, Stephanie? Do they understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So thank you for having me on. This is the first time I've been on your channel, although I think you've been on my channel quite a few times.
No, you've been on my channel way back in the beginning. You were the first person I ever had on my channel.
Oh, okay, great. Okay,
remember,
so this is the second
you were helping
time.
You were helping me stream live the first, like.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Kind of dropping out a little bit.
I'm pretty sure you're the first person I ever had on my channel.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, so everybody, if you're coming in here, just please like, subscribe to Craig's channel. This is always it's always a lot of fun discussing atheists and Christians with Craig. So we, Dr. Alex, I think it's Dr. Alex Malpass, but he's an atheist, and I think he has a pretty horrible argument. Sorry, I let the cat out of the bag. Yeah, the problem of evil. And so he feels that the problem of evil means there's no God. And Michael Brown, that's also Dr. Michael Brown, he believes that the problem of evil demonstrates that the Christian God actually offers a good explanation for the suffering we see.
Exactly. He hates you. That's the explanation.
Yeah. So I think let's go. Should we go ahead and lay this whole thing out? You want because I've got the control here to put the video on.
Yeah, so. Fire up, and we'll do what we do when we do on your channel. Stephanie and I do a lot of these on her channel. What was the best one we did? We did one with
Apologia. I thought the Apologia Sean McDowell one was good.
That was a good one. And then we did one last year. We did like 3 or 4 last year, right around Christmas time, that were really good. One with Glenn Scribner debate with Matt Dillahunty, where we had Converse Contender showed up. We did like 3 streams with him that are pretty good. Do you remember?
Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, those were great. I forgot about Converse Contender. We got to get him in here sometime too.
Yeah, if he shows up, maybe we'll invite him on.
Yeah, cool. All right, so I'm just making the screen bigger. So here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and play this.
Fire up.
Can you hear that? Wait, let me just. I want to make volume louder here, so everybody can hear it. Okay, you can hear it. Good.
Hypothesis of indifference. So those of you who know.
Whoops, sorry.
Here,
let me just start from here.
Here at Modern Day Debate. So thanks, Dr. Malpass, for being here. It's a joy to have you.
No, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. And so with that, we'll basically hand it over to Dr. Malpass to kind of get the ball rolling. And so this is kind of like a flexible, roughly like 5 to 10 minutes, whatever kind of time he needs. And then we'll go into that open discussion. The floor is all yours. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks very much. So I think it's seeing as we're talking about the problem of evil, the problem of suffering, that it's incumbent upon me, I guess, as the atheist, to lay out a case so that we can talk about that for the rest of the hour. So I'm going to just very quickly share my screen and show you what I'm calling a modest argument, modest evidential argument from suffering. So it's very straightforward. Just some definitions at the beginning. S is just some fact about suffering, where that doesn't really matter what that is, but just insert some fact about suffering, that your favorite particular example about something horrible that happens to somebody. And then I is the hypothesis of indifference. So those of you who know philosophy of religion literature quite well will already spot that this is inspired by Paul Draper's version of the argument from evil, although it's much more simplified than his, I think. The hypothesis of indifference is basically just the idea that the kind of nature and circumstances around.
His hypothesis of indifference?
Are you there?
Wait, yeah, what'd you say, Craig?
I didn't actually catch that the first time around, that he was actually referencing a standard argument. Draper, is that who he said? Do you know
Yeah,
what he's referencing?
Paul Draper. I'm not familiar with that one, actually. I didn't catch that either, that he mentioned Draper before for some reason. I just looked at this argument right here.
Because the reason why I thought this was interesting to analyze, do you want to say something about his argument before, or should we let it play out? You can critique it. It's up to you.
I think this is the worst argument I've ever seen, but I'll just say
the worst problem.
I was so happy. I was so happy when I listened to this, knowing we were going to review it, because it's downright awful.
Well, what's the construct of it? Did we play enough so people understand what he said the construct is, or should we keep going?
I think we need to keep going just a little bit.
Okay, and then we'll summarize it.
Okay, here we go.
We got to steel man it a little. Oh, it's the first argument I've ever heard. It's not quite steel manning it exactly. It's a little bit different than steel. This is the worst problem of evil. It's an argument I've ever heard in my life.
It's pretty bad. But here we go.
Sentient beings suffering is not the output, not the product of an intelligence, whether that's benevolent or evil. It's just not that. So this hypothesis is not quite the same thing as naturalism. It kind of includes naturalism, but there's no reason to suppose that, I mean, for all the hypothesis of indifference says, there could be ghosts or, whatever. It's not strictly speaking naturalism. It's just saying that the world and our circumstances relevant to suffering isn't the product of an intelligence. And then T is just the hypothesis of theism. And here, all I mean by this is very straightforward. It's just your omni-God. So the God that's all-powerful, all-knowing, and all good, perfectly good. So classical God of theism. And then all the argument is, premise one, it says the probability of suffering on the hypothesis of indifference is quite high. Premise two says the probability of suffering on the hypothesis of theism is quite low. From these, it follows that the probability of suffering on indifference is greater than the probability of suffering on theism. And that, by definition, that just means that suffering is evidence that favors indifference over theism. So the conclusion of this argument isn't that God doesn't exist. I haven't logically proved that God doesn't exist. A theist might even accept this argument, because what they might do is say, yeah, evil is evidence that favors indifference over theism, but you know what, there's more evidence that comes into play that is relevant to my decision. So they might have a proof that God exists. So even though this is evidence that favors indifference over theism, it kind of gets swamped out by other things that they take themselves to know. So it's a modest argument. But what it's just saying is if we just focus on the facts that are about suffering, then that makes it more likely that indifference is true.
See, Craig, I think this is the worst argument, because here's the thing. He's got the probability. He's looking at the probability that suffering is explained by indifference, and he just writes quite high. He has the probability that suffering involves theism, or there's a theist explanation. Oh, am I? Shoot. Okay. Wait, let me just see.
Wait, no, I think you might be okay for them. So.
Okay, well, he's saying the probability of suffering given indifference is quite high, but probability of suffering if we have God is quite low. And so he just made up his own little probabilities here. And that's what I think is crazy when I saw that part, because I think his probability that indifference, it's sort of going back to what Richard Dawkins says about the universe doesn't care and that sort of thing. And so that's that argument. But I don't see where he can come up with these probability assessments. He just made them up. He just, I mean, to me, if you look out at the universe and you look at our DNA and you look at the way that we're sort of in a Goldilocks zone.
That's the part that you see.
Yeah, that's the part I think is pretty ridiculous.
Right.
What do you think?
I got you. Well, the reason why I wanted to do this one is because it mirrors the Richard Dawkins that we live in a universe that is pitiless and indifferent to human life, or indifferent to our suffering. But it also, did you ever read the book The Stranger? No. The Stranger is Albert Camus, who was also like an atheist existentialist. And it's probably probably one of the most read of the existentialist novels. Everybody I know read it in college. Everybody had it. Everyone, because it's really easy to read. Did you know the song "The Cure," "Killing an Arab"? You ever hear that song?
Yeah, I
Can you hear
definitely
me,
know.
by the
I
way?
love
Am
The
I
Cure.
shorting out or am I fine?
No, you're fine right now.
That's about the stranger killing. But there, at the end of the book, he talks about how the guy goes off and experiences the benign indifference of the world. So it's like a common argument of the existentialists and philosophers prior to, like, the type of atheists we deal with, that God's indifference to humanity, or that we live in a world that's totally indifferent to humanity. That's why I wanted to address it, because it's fairly common. It's not that common in our circle with like internet, like YouTube atheists, but outside of that, it's pretty common.
Yeah. See, he's saying if there's a God, one of the things that I think that why Christianity explains the problem of evil so well is because we look at our Jesus and we look at how he suffered on the cross. And God certainly could have stopped that. And Jesus actually, at that one point in the Garden of Gethsemane, tried to ask God if it's his will and did he have to go through this sort of thing. And so, and he did want to. Jesus, again, volunteered to do this. And so I think just looking at that gives us an explanation that God will work through evil to bring good.
Right. Well, that's even in the scripture. What Satan meant for harm, God turned to good. Does Michael Brown do a opening statement in this? I forget.
He does. Yeah. Should we go to his opening statement?
Yeah, we'll go to, and then we'll go back and talk it over. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, let's listen to what he says.
We got a couple people in the audience, by the way. Mr. Parker and Stephen Steen are in the audience.
Stephen Steen. Did you see how he lost that bet with JB, and now he's got to be, I think, a Black Lives Matter supporter and a Trump supporter for a week? Did you catch this?
No.
Oh, it's
what
awesome.
happened? Which one has to be the Black Lives Matter and which one has to be Trump?
I think both. I think JB got to pick out his profile pics for the next week, and one of them is like he picked out it's Black Lives Matter supporters, and then the other one is him like I don't really know what the bet was. Trump was going to one of them was going to win Ohio. I guess JB said he would, and Steen said he wouldn't. And then the loser has to put on their Twitter profile pic what the winner says for a week. So he's trying to make them look ridiculous. I don't know.
Hilarious.
Steve, is Steen there? Ask him.
I'm gonna have to go look at Steven's Twitter profile to see if.
Sure, I got it right.
Which one lost? Did JB lose or did Steven lose?
What's that?
Which one of them
Steven
lost?
I guess I thought Steven lost.
Oh, that's so funny.
That's the deal. If you lose the bet, then JB gets to pick out whatever most embarrassing thing he can put on his profile pic for a week.
Oh wow, that's classic.
Yeah, it's really funny. So it made him look like he likes Black Lives Matter for a week. I think I got this right. Go check.
Charged. Yeah. Should we check?
You can check if you want to. Is he here? Is he not? Is he not answering? Is he?
He's
too
in here. He
embarrassed?
hasn't answered, but I'm going to look at his profile.
He's probably too embarrassed.
Stephen Steen. Why can't I find it all of a sudden?
I don't know why Stephen Steen thought that Trump was going to lose Ohio. Ohio is effectively a red state these days.
Look at this picture.
Yeah. See?
You want me to share the screen?
Yeah, do it. Go for it.
This is hilarious.
Really did he run away in shame? JB, when you watch this was really fun.
Let me see if I can get this. I got to get Twitter up. There. Can you see it?
Let me see if I. Yeah, you can see it.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, it's totally hilarious.
I didn't know he had to do that. That's so funny. Sorry, Steve.
Sorry, Stephen. We're just taking delight at your misfortune.
Look how they put his head on.
See, there's the problem of evil right there. How could a good God be indifferent to poor Stephen Steen suffering at the hands of JB? Stephen Steen is the good Christian young man. JB is the evil atheist, and God seems indifferent to Stephen Steen's suffering.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, I'm going to go back and share audio. Let me just get the video back here. Hold on. Suffering in God's existence. So we were going to listen to Michael Brown's part of it. You want to?
Yes. Let's listen to his opening statement.
Okay, cool. Here we go.
Theism is false than the other way around. Doesn't make it more likely that theism is true. So I think I could probably just stop there, because that's basically the argument. This is, I guess, a version of the evidential argument, which is, that's to say, contrasting with the logical argument from evil, which would be to say that the existence of God is logically incompatible with the existence of evil. I'm not making that claim. For I'm saying here, God could exist, and I'm not saying that God could exist.
Is that in the debate, or is that in your?
All I'm saying is that
That's my dog.
the presence.
Oh, that's
of
you. Okay, I wasn't sure. No, that's fine.
Than if he does, and that makes it evidence in favour of God not existing. So I think I'm just going to stop there, because hopefully, I mean, I guess I could leave this up for a bit, at least if we're going to talk about the premises, so people can see them. So, Mike, I'm happy to hand over to you now if you wanted to have a stab at something.
Sure thing. So, from my perspective, there's no problem of suffering unless God exists. There's the pain of suffering, but there's not the problem of suffering. When a spider is eating a fly, there's not a theological problem for the fly. It's just reality of the natural world. But if there is a God, and it is the God of the Bible, a good and compassionate and all-knowing and all-powerful God, then suffering becomes a real question and a real problem. How can a good God create a world in which such suffering exists, so much of it seemingly random and to no purpose? But without a God, there is no answer to the problem of suffering. And with a God, there are profound and extraordinary answers. So I would certainly not say, even for a split second, that the problem of suffering or evil proves the existence of God. But I would say, given the other indications for the existence of God, that the God of the Bible is the one that provides a redemptive answer for the problem of suffering. So I would look first broadly at the evidences of creator, that there is no rational explanation for the origin of the universe without a divine first cause, that we cannot believe nothing created everything. There remains no scientific explanation for the origin of life. There remains no scientific explanation for the DNA coding in human beings. There remains no scientific evidence even for our understanding of moral consciousness. And all of those things point to the reality of an intelligent designer. Then supernatural divine intervention, documented miracles that defy rational explanation. Those also point to the reality of the creator. And then the Bible now gives us guidelines explaining that
Stephanie,
human beings are created in the image of God.
Have you ever heard his, have you ever heard, when he mentioned miracles, doesn't he do an argument from miracles, Dr. Michael Brown specifically, where he talks about not necessarily the miracle of the resurrection, but things that happened at that are what he just mentioned, like documented miracles that are more closer to here and now, like either at meetings he's attended or things like that. Do you know? Have you heard? Do you know this, or do you know what I'm talking about?
I haven't heard Dr. Brown say that, but I think he brings up Craig Keener's book, because Craig Keener's got 2 volumes.
Have you read that yet?
No, I haven't. I only read Leif Strobel's book on miracles.
Okay, because supposedly that Greg Keener, I think I heard IC mentioning it once on Twitter. Supposedly that book is really good. I haven't checked it out. What's the Lee Strobel one? Is it miracles like in today's world, like reported miracles of like prayer meetings and things? And
yes,
are they documented and they have?
They're documented. He's got the one like what was that one lady's name? Oh, I can't remember. Her name will come to me in a minute. But he has the one where the lady had MS and she was bedridden, and her Comiskey Snyder, Barbara Comiskey Snyder.
Okay. You heard? No, I haven't heard of it. I haven't looked into these at all. That's why I'm asking.
There's a couple of them that Lee Strobel documented, and so he's got the Barbara Comiskey Snyder one where she was bedridden with MS and she couldn't walk or anything, and suddenly she hears the words, "My child, get up and walk," and all of her atrophy went away and she was able to walk. She just all of a sudden miraculously was able to get up and start walking through her house, and so she went straight to church. And the people at church couldn't believe it because she'd been in a wheelchair for like 6 years.
Now,
And so-
what are the counter arguments? What do people say? It's not well documented, or
People say, oh, well, people have spontaneous remission all the time. And I just don't, come on. Alongside with my child get up and walk. So,
Right, okay.
and the other thing is, it was all these people were praying for her. So that there were radio stations going where people were saying all kinds of prayers for her. So it's answered prayers, if you ask me. And the woman today,
Now,
she's still around. This happened in the early 80s. She's still around, and she still hasn't had any sort of recurrence of her MS.
now you had Michael Brown on your channel, right?
Yes.
It wasn't to talk about miracles though. What was it?
No. He's written some books. I've read 2 of his books, and so we talked a little bit about those. But one of them is called "Answering Jewish Objections to the New Testament, to Jesus," and because he's Jewish. I don't know if you guys know that Michael Brown was born into the Jewish faith, and he now calls himself like a Jew for Jesus, or a Messianic Jew.
Right.
And so he said he was doing drugs and all this crazy stuff when he was 16 and 17, and all of a sudden he just accepted Jesus, and his entire life changed.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I'm going to start bringing up more in my videos. I mean, that's a common testimony where somebody has, hypothetically at least, there's a power of the Holy Spirit in someone's life that people become Christians. And then even with me, I stopped drinking, stopped smoking, stopped doing drugs, fairly easily. That's like a common thing. Like David Wood used to be a psychopath, and like everybody knows that those testimonies are legitimate. And nobody thinks that those testimonies aren't true. I don't think, right?
I wouldn't have said that except for David Wood. Here's the crazy thing. So I just did a little video where I had David Wood on my channel. Not the real David. I didn't really get David. Well, I didn't get David on my channel. I just did a video review.
Yeah, well, you showed the clips. Yes.
Yeah. And so somebody says in the chat, it says, well, he doesn't believe that David Wood is a real psychopath or was a real psych. I'm like, who would lie about being a psychopath? That's the worst thing in the world to be.
There's a difference between like normal skepticism where you're like, okay, show me the goods, and like skepticism, like I just, I don't even know what you call that, cynicism, or like,
I mean, the guy he tried to kill his dad. He hit him in the head with a hammer, and he didn't care. I mean, that is the textbook definition of psychopaths. They know right from wrong, but they just don't care.
Right, but most of the atheists that we deal with know that these stories are true, right? I mean, they understand that these are true stories.
I think most of them.
How are they processing this as like, this doesn't count as evidence towards anything? There's at least theoretically a transformational power of the Holy Spirit available to people that you see, like the one that I always bring up is my brother-in-law. He became almost completely a different person according to the rest of the family. They were like, he's a lot nicer. He cares. He like just, naturally became more of a like, concerned about the well-being of everybody else by virtue of the fact that he'd just recently become a Christian. That's pretty common testimony.
Yeah,
right?
No, that is. I would say the same thing. So it's not even, you don't even need these modern day miracles, but there are some. There's this other one where there's a guy who lost his voice.
The miracles, the skeptic's always going to get their skeptic on and find like, I mean, there might be legitimately like really hard to shrug off miracles in the here and now in the real world. I don't doubt that there are some that are documented well enough, and that even like the most skeptical of skeptics would be like, okay, and they'll just put it on the side of like, okay, that's inexplicable at least. You know what I'm saying? Like we could easily find like 4 of those, right? Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's some really amazing ones. There's this other one where there's a guy and he lost his voice, and he was working for the church, and he had to stop working for the church because he was doing some pastor work for the church, and completely lost his voice. And so that lasted for a while, and all of a sudden he was speaking. Then he was able to speak a little bit, but it was like kind of really froggy, like he could barely get anything out. And so then he went and he for some reason decided he was going to go try to teach a Sunday school class. And as he's talking and reading this verse in the Bible about how God is sovereign, and how God, he can help people and all that kind of stuff, his voice started coming back, and the whole thing is recorded. It's just amazing.
Wow. Wow.
But then atheists say, well, that's just a coincidence.
Well, it definitely could be a coincidence, but when you start to correlate these things and line them up, it's kind of a lot of coincidences. Like the testimony of the person whose life is changed when they become a Christian is really common. And yeah, it's anecdotal evidence, but if you line up all that anecdotes together, that constitutes data. And there's a real transformational power going on in people's lives. I mean, I experienced it firsthand, and a lot of the people we know have experienced some version of that firsthand, however mild. Some like, I used to be XYZ PDQ, then I became a Christian, and now I don't struggle with this, I don't struggle with that. My life is much easier in this regards. And if there was more of that available to a lot of people, some of them probably wouldn't have deconverted, at least from what I've heard. Some of them, that was evidence in favor of not God. Like they were struggling with things that, the church wasn't helping them solve or heal from, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's some of the reasons that people choose to be atheists and reject God. I think a lot of them are emotional, actually. And I know I don't think it's because somebody went to look at the evidence, because I think there's plenty of evidence for God in miracles and Jesus and everything else. I think it's a response to maybe some rude Christians. I mean, it could be bad Christians in the church. It could be some of the priest stuff or pastor stuff. I mean, there could be reasons that people have rejected God because they're mad at something.
Well,
So,
there's definitely plays into it for sure. But yeah, a lot of people will be like,
a lot. Well, they get mad when I say that too, because if I say, and I mean, it's even like the girl that you had on your channel. Sorry if she's listening, but ex-Christian. What was her name? Ex-Christian Erin.
She's coming back next Saturday, I think.
Oh, she is. Okay, because when she said something like, and I tried to go back and catch it. I got to go find where she said that. She said something like, God didn't hold up his end of the deal, and so then she just decided that he must not exist. And
well,
so
there's some legitimacy to that, in terms of, not that you would necessarily become an atheist, but there's some legitimacy to that. If we could address that in a way that people could solve that, then those objections would be gone. Do you know what I mean? Like, I didn't find that true at all, but I can understand if somebody found that to be true, how they'd start to become skeptical and start to, gradually walk away from the church.
Well, you had the story. See, you had that story with Tom Jump too.
Yes, when I was in, he said something very similar. I forget the details, where he was like, I guess like struggling. He was overweight and he was really depressed, and he was crying out to God all the time, and he felt like God didn't answer him or didn't care. Indifferent. See, this is what we were talking about. God was indifferent to his suffering. And if he didn't, that was a big part of his story to me. I mean, that was just one time when I was on his channel. I don't know if I've heard him talk about it that much outside of the time when I was on his channel. Have you heard him mention it other than that?
I've never heard him mention that. And he, for a while there, he was kind of running around and getting on everybody's channel, doing tons and tons of debates. It was like he had just come out as an atheist or something, but I haven't seen him lately at all.
He does debates. He does like 2 or 3 debates a week.
Oh, does he still? I didn't know that.
Well, they're mostly on his channel. Yeah, he's always got a debate on his channel. His debates are fun to watch. I watch a lot of T-Jump debates.
Yeah, I debated him.
Of his debates.
And I debated Saturday before Easter on the resurrection.
I never saw that one.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite debates.
The thing that I just had him on recently, because there was the Matt Dillahunty debated the Krishnas, then Aaron Ra debated the Krishnas, and then T-Jump. Of the 3, T-Jump was by far and away the best behaved of the 3. T-Jump had a normal conversation with I forget the guy he talked to, Shrivnu or something. The rest of them, like Aaron Ra's Aaron Ra. It doesn't matter what type of person.
Oh yeah.
If it's a Christian, if it was this guy Arayuna, the guy who I had on my channel, it's basically the same agenda. Let me prove to you that you're an idiot, and we just show you that you're an idiot, no matter what. For like an hour and a half, barely let him get words out edgewise without getting in his face and foaming at the mouth.
The thing is, yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No,
I mean, the thing with Aaron Ra is he's got like a playbook, and he says the same lines over and over, even after he's been corrected on it. He keeps saying it. Like he keeps saying that all Christians.
He even said it to this guy, and it was totally inappropriate to the Hindu. It was the same playbook. was saying it to Harry. He was like, one of his main arguments to him was like, you and I think this Hindu guy is going to burn in hell or something like that. It was like, so like, what planet is this argumentation from?
Hindus don't even think that. That's not what they think. They don't even think there's a hell.
No, he
Hindus
was saying we the Christians.
Oh,
like the argument is really, really annoying. It's a standard like God can't exist because he believes something about God and we believe something different. Therefore, they logically cancel each other out, which is an inane idea. Like, it doesn't really matter what anybody believes. It's irrelevant to the ontology. But it was that argument. That's basically what he presented to him.
yeah.
You can't be right about your religious experience because there's a Christian somewhere who has a totally logically cancels out what you believe because they believe something else. that's the basic the logic.
Maybe we should review that. That sounds like the worst. I thought that might even top Malpass.
Oh yeah, we can review that. Ariano will get a kick out of it.
bad.
I'm actually friends with him. I chat with him on DMs a lot. He's probably going to have a chat with John on my channel.
Who, Aaron Ra?
No, Aryuna and Aaron Ra.
Okay.
Aryuna is the Hindu. Aaron Ra sounds like Aryuna, sounds like, but isn't. I never noticed that before. That's hilarious. Aaron Ra, Aryuna. Aaron Ra, say them both 3 times fast.
Yeah.
Aaron Ra, Aryuna. I didn't notice that.
I can't believe that's how he argued. Because here's the thing, what he does. Number one, he says that Christians believe in faith. They have faith, but we have no evidence. And that faith means we have zero evidence. But that's not what the pistis Greek word means. It says even in the Bible, always test, always check, always learn. I mean, there's all this good stuff in the Bible. And so it's not that we're just believing without any sort of evidence at all. I don't think anybody would rationally do that.
Right.
And the other thing is his other argument is he loves to talk about, well, the Bible didn't get it right. Bats aren't birds. Well, guess what? If he actually took 2 seconds to look up the word that described in categories as both bats and birds, it's a winged creature that's not an insect. That's what the Hebrew word is. And so a bat and a bird, both of them are winged creatures that aren't insects. And so
I've never heard the bats not birds one. Where's that from?
Oh, he says that all the time. That's Aaron Ra's, at least I've heard him say that a bunch of times, because he's got this little, I think he might have even said it when he was debating IP.
Really?
So, yeah, he's like, well, bats aren't birds.
Didn't we review that one? I think we reviewed that, didn't we, or no?
Yeah, I think we probably did. Maybe we didn't. A lot of times we review stuff and we don't see the whole thing.
We do what we're doing now. We just start chatting and totally forget what we're reviewing. Okay, so let's go back and review what we're reviewing. This is exactly what we do every time we review now. We just start
Yeah, we better do that. I want to say hi to Joe Tink too, and X Rabbit and Mr. Parker. So we got some good people here.
X Rabbit is like the new good atheist. The guy's sharp. He's on Twitter. I see his comments on Twitter. He's like he's like one of the atheists you can have. He's like real atheology. There's a couple atheists out there that make real points and like say substantive stuff in debates on Twitter. He's one of them.
If Joe Tink, I think it's John Joe Tink, if I'm not mistaken, who's this person who's in here. I think he personally knows Aaron Ra, if I'm thinking of the right person.
I don't know.
He actually worked with him before,
person?
So he can let us know. He hasn't answered it yet, but maybe he'll. Oh. So I'll go. Should we go back and listen to more of Michael Brown?
Yes.
Okay, so here we go.
He's winning, by the way. He's winning, guys.
He's winning.
He's winning.
Clear. Well, even when I want to say, when he said the probability that suffering can be explained with theism is low or quite low, again, he just established his own levels, but he's ignoring the fact that 93% of the world does believe in some sort of higher life form or spirituality and that kind of stuff. So I think the probability of being an atheist is actually quite low.
Well, it was rare to non-existent until, relatively recently in world history.
Yeah, pretty much, definitely rare. They had the word back then, atheism, but a lot of times that referred to godless or without God or any of that kind of stuff. So there were a few around, I guess, but not like the kind of numbers that we're seeing today on social media. So, okay, right. So here we go with Michael Brown.
Willfully sinned, which brings great suffering and pain in the world, but that God is working in it for a purpose. And that many times we go through terrible things in life, horrific things that we would not wish on anyone else. And yet through them, we grow, through them, good things happen So it's rational to say that this all-powerful, all-good, all-knowing God could create a world foreseeing the suffering that would come, and yet knowing that he could bring something good out of it. It may not be something that we fully can conceive and understand now, but our micro experiences tell us that the macro could be true as well. So I would first start with evidences for the existence of God. And I'm not a scientist, so I'm not prepared to debate the details of biology and geology, but the broad strokes. I would start there. And then I would say that you take God out of the picture, there's no purpose, there's no meaning, it's all random. Even the conversation we're having here is ultimately of no cosmic significance. You factor God in, now there can be meaning, hope, redemption, and a good explanation for the problem of suffering.
So I think that's pretty powerful. What do you think about that?
It's good. What do they call that? Soul building theology, theodicy, when you're saying that like it's for the good of the greater good of the human being to suffering. A partial justification for suffering would be that it helps people grow, and then there's a partial justification. He said in the micro and the macro. Is that what he said? Am I understanding that correctly? So
Yeah.
that could be a potential like overall big picture answer as well.
I think so, because he started off just by talking about different evidence for God. And I think like he mentioned, there's evidence in DNA. I mean, there's evidence of a coder when you have DNA over 3 billion well-organized, what they call letters, L, G, C, and T, and they're all in this exact code. They're all in this exact order. I mean, where did that come from? If we're not a coder. So right. It seems just basic. But then if I go to the other thing that he was mentioning that I think you're also talking about is how could we know, I mean, how do you develop empathy if there's nothing to be empathetic over? Or how do you develop perseverance if there's nothing to persevere? No reason to try hard. How do we overcome tribulations if we've never faced tribulations?
Right.
And so I think a lot of that, I think that's what God's doing. He's building souls. And people hate when I say that, like the atheists, they hate that. They get kind of crazy on the internet when I say that.
Why? What's their main objection to that one?
Like, why would he do that? Why do we have to suffer? We shouldn't have to suffer. In a perfect world, God would not make anybody suffer. You know what I mean?
Right.
God doesn't want us.
They are aware, like in Christian theology, answers why that we are, at least some are heading towards a world where there is no suffering. There is no sorrow, where we're completely reconciled to the heart of God forever and ever and ever. And there's, gee, what a coincidence, no sorrow, no sickness, no suffering, and no death forever. So all of the problems of the world, one of the ways in the Bible says that do not think the suffering of the present time are worthy to be compared to the glory to be revealed in us, is that these sufferings are, trivial and light in relationship to what we are to expect in the world to come. And that's part of Christian theology. And most of the times when atheists talk about the problem of evil, they don't factor that in. Like, who on earth would really care if you live a 50 years or 30 years of a miserable life if you head towards, immortality of awesomeness forever and ever and ever? Would you trade that? Of course. Right?
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. That's why I put Nabil Qureshi's video on my thing too, is because it's a lot of, I keep getting in these conversations and finding out a lot of people are universalists, and they think that no matter what their position is on the earth, eventually God's going to reconcile all of us to him.
Right.
And
I have no problem with it. I just would never, I think that'd be awesome, but I don't necessarily think that it's what happens.
Yeah, because that's why I brought up Nabil Qureshi, is because Nabil had this dream when he was raised as a Muslim, and his grandparents and his parents and everybody very, very strong Muslims. And so it's really hard to leave the Muslim faith, he said. And in some places they can be killed. They can justify killing somebody who apostatizes. And so he was begging to God and saying, please give him a sign, please give him a sign. And so he has this dream that he's standing outside the door of a really amazing banquet, and he sees David Wood sitting in there, and he can't get into the banquet because Wood is kind of blocking him, and he can't see who's the owner.
No Muslims allowed. Is he a Muslim when he's having this saying no Muslims?
Yeah, he was a Muslim.
Ban on
and so So Nabil said, David, something like, I want to come in or something like that. And David said, well, you haven't accepted the invitation. And then, so the next morning he wakes up and he calls David up and he tells him about the dream. And he said he could hear David's eyes rolling in the back of his head. And he's like, that's Luke 13, the great banquet where you're waiting for Christ. And if you don't accept the offer, he's not going to let you in the door. And so that speaks kind of against universalism.
That guy's dream speaks against universalism.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No.
Yeah, well, no, but so does
so
the parable.
Right. There are definitely scriptures that contradict universalism. I would never preach it because, we don't know. We're not God, So you can't say, oh, definitely. I mean, to me, the thing that makes the most sense is that the only people who wind up burning on a lake of fire are like the truly evil. It's based on what you do in this life, like the Heinrich Himmlers and the Joseph Mengeles, not necessarily the in-between people who are just for whatever, that's the only thing that makes sense to me, but I'm not God. So what I think about the subject isn't really relevant. It's what we talk about, but it's not, we're not ultimately the people deciding this.
Yeah, I know. I figure we got to play by the rules and live by the rules. And he establishes the rules. If he wants to have mercy on somebody, then he'll do it. So
right, and
he knows people's hearts.
Right. I assume just based on my own experience and common sense that God is going to be completely just and fair, and that there's going to be no, hey, wait a minute.
I think Renee. You know who Renee Renevelation?
Yeah, of course.
So he wants to have a conversation with me off camera where he says he's gonna tell me how I should be treating atheists and how I'm doing a lot of it all wrong.
Right? Yeah, you bully atheists. I said that. I haven't posted that video yet.
No, I don't. But then he's a funny one too, because he said something like, if God does exist, well then God better let him into heaven no matter what he thinks. What'd you say?
Wait, what does he think you're doing wrong?
I don't know what he thinks. Well, he thinks that we should have more like friendly, casual conversations with atheists instead of trying to debate them or say something that.
I agree with that. I think
I think that's fair.
That's smart. But I think you do that. You've started doing that a lot on your actual channel.
Yeah, I've had Renee on my channel. We had a friendly chat. We were talking about Germany and some cool stuff.
Yeah, what did you talk about? I watched some of it. I had Renee on my channel a while back.
We talked a lot of it about Germany, a lot of it about Renee himself, and just and we talked about German castles and the difference between the Catholics and the Protestants in Germany and that kind of thing.
That's cool.
So,
yeah, the story about Renee that I always refer back to in my videos is when he was like 7, he's told you that Africa story, right?
Yeah.
Where he had like what they call the numinous experience, but I would call a spiritual experience. And most people, that experience is really, really common to everyday human beings. People have it all over the world. It's transcultural. If you don't have a dog in the fight, most people have that experience and think of it as, oh, that was probably God. They think of it as at least a quasi-religious experience. I don't know how he defines it now, but back then he probably would have, right? Has he told you about? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, he did. He talked about it even on my channel just recently.
Right.
So actually I've asked just about every atheist who comes on my channel if they've had a spiritual experience. If I remember to ask that question, I'll ask it. And every one of them that I asked that question has. And then they just said, well, they realize now that it really wasn't an atheist, it wasn't a spiritual experience. But right. At the time they thought it was.
When you have experiences like that prior to even having any type of religious conviction, you think they're God. It's a normal inference. You're like, wait a minute. That was probably God. That's how my sister had an experience like that. Right after she just had her first child, she was sitting on a beach and she had this powerful sense of like this. Oh, she's not a Christian. I don't even know how she called herself then, probably a non. And she had this powerful sense of like peaceful feeling where she was looking at her child and she felt the love she had for her child. And she was like, there's got to be. She had some sort of logical inference follows like. There's got to be a meaning to all of this. There's got to be, life is so like profound. There's got to be a purpose to all this. It can't just be a random occurrence, something like that. And she had the powerful sense of peace. And she described it as if there is a God, that was God prior to becoming a Christian. Now, she became a Christian after I became a Christian years later because of the miracle thing where they saw the transformation in me and they're like, there's no way there's something real about this because the transformation was so stark. You know what I mean? Like I think you could probably imagine how I was before I was a Christian. I was a little bit out there. So they were like, what? Go ahead.
No, I agree. I see. I think I actually am consciously nicer than I was. I'm pretty sure. Like I would say that's probably a pretty good deal. But
well, the thing that struck everybody is to stop drinking, stop smoking, stop doing drugs almost immediately. That's pretty stark when you're, my wife didn't drink at all, but I was pretty much a functional alcoholic still when I became a Christian. So that's pretty stark. I mean, this was like 8 months later, or maybe a year later, my family came out, Marietta and Matt, and they were like, what, it was that's in and of itself a big difference, never mind the fact that I was like talking about Christianity, that was enough right there for them to be like, what's up with this? I don't know. I'll get them on the channel at some point and ask them because they're Christian. They became Christians immediately on the spot.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And then they went to a church in Brooklyn that was this kind of like cool alternative church for a while. And I don't know if they still go there. I forget. I haven't talked to them about it in a while. But there you go.
I'd like to, it's so funny because one of my brothers, so I decided it was around 2012, 2011, right around that time. I felt like Jesus was making himself very obvious to me. Right. And so it all kind of started right around then. But so everybody in my family knows where I stand right now on Christianity. And my brother, who announced a few years ago that he's an agnostic, he told me that. And so then the funny thing is last Christmas, he kept following me around we were at my other brother's house, and he kept following me around, asking me all these questions about God and Christianity and Jesus. And I thought it was funny because all of a sudden he's interested, I don't think I just don't think he's going to stay an agnostic very much longer. He doesn't even fit he's not at all like the kind of atheist you see online, like or agnostics or whatever. But
did you listen to London Theist on? I'm
having him on my channel a week from Monday.
Did you listen when he was on Adherence?
Yeah.
I'll probably get him on here soon too. And
I heard him because he talked about you. He listens to your channel a lot.
I know he said that. He said but then he mentioned some of the religious experiences, and I forget. But he went from what was the actual trajectory with him? Was it to an atheist to?
See, I missed that part of his thing. And that's one of the things I got to figure out. I actually should probably listen to Adherent's whole message before I have London on, because I didn't get that part.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what he was before. I think he was just sort of not really claiming any religion, if the way that it seemed like, but I don't know. I'll have to listen to that. But he had spiritual experiences. That part I heard.
Yes, I heard that part. Yeah, no, I listened to a huge chunk of it. I was trying to find where he referenced me. I found it.
Yeah, it was funny because I saw him on that and I thought, wait a second, I think I've seen the name London Theist. So I went back to my Twitter account and we're following each other.
Yeah.
I was like, cool. Oh, cool. So, yeah. So this particular, should we go back to our debate?
Yeah.
How much longer you have?
I have until she leaves, and it doesn't look like she's leaving. So,
okay.
And if she leaves, there's a chance that I'm streaming off of her hotspot right now. So if she leaves, the phone leaves, but there's a chance that my regular internet will be back up by then. So I might still be able to stream.
Yeah, your connection is way better than it was when you first got on here, by the way.
Interesting.
Like your voice, you're not dropping off at all. And at first you were just a little bit.
Huh.
So maybe your internet's getting better.
Yeah, it could be. So we'll see. Maybe we'll just do. She hasn't left. That's why I tried to make it 3:30, because she was supposed to leave at 2:30. And what time is it now? Like 10 after 3, right? That's my wife in a nutshell.
Yeah, 22 after.
Yeah, she said she's going to leave at 2:30. It'll be, maybe she'll leave by 4. I thought I was pushing it with 3:30. So we'll see. She probably won't leave at all. So I'll be here the whole time.
Yeah, that's
a good
cool.
chance. She usually is an hour and a half after the time.
Hey, I want to ask you about California. How is it living out there right now? Because it still crazy lockdowns, or what's going on?
It's still, yes, it's still all locked down. But for me personally, it doesn't really, out here where we live, it's not that big of a deal. I don't do a lot of the like go to stores and shopping type stuff. So I don't really see how it is, in the real world. Because I kind of live disconnected from the real world anyways. So I barely noticed even when full lockdown. But,
Any protests around where you live, or is that kind of also?
They did walk down the street once. There were protests in Santa Monica, and it was real. The Santa Monica 3rd Street Promenade, which is a really nice neighborhood, had break-ins, robberies. My wife was at. It was stark how close to home it hit. Because I don't know if people saw this, but we were watching the local news. So we saw like what was happening in LA proper, which is literally like half an hour away. 3rd Street Promenade is just a normal, nice neighborhood of LA. It's one of my favorite neighborhoods. And where my wife went, she's thinking of buying a bike. So she went to the bike store and asked about their bikes. And they said, yeah, but we can't get one for a year because we had $50,000 worth of bikes stolen.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's the type of stuff that you hear about. Like,
I've been to 2 bike shops trying to buy another bike because I want a second bike so I can leave it in Boca. But they're totally out of bikes. But it's not because they were stolen. They're all on back order. Yeah,
well, these were stolen. They had $50,000 worth of goods stolen, and these are like local stores. And then $100 million was taken out of the police budget at the same time because of the defund the police movement.
That's so stupid.
Yeah, it was psychotic. And then you see a difference. You see a difference in like, there's a liquor store owner right down the street where I used to work when we first moved out here. And like, he said he had a break-in, just, that's not related to the riots, but that's just something that never happened here before, for 20 years. He had first break-in in 20 years. And someone tried to set fire to a store. That's the type of stuff. Like there was a group of Black Lives Matter people who walked down the street once, shouting stuff. Other than that, we don't really see it. But it was pretty intense. Like it was very similar to what happened in Tampa, where you showed the videos of like, what was that, like a Target or something?
Yeah. That Tampa, there's one part of Tampa, there's a couple parts of Tampa that are pretty, can be pretty dangerous. Like even when it's not protests or marching or anything like that, they're just, for example, someone was just shot in this one neighborhood a couple nights ago. Actually, a bunch of people, they were at this party and somebody started shooting people. And so people were shot and some people killed. And it's just unfortunate, but that just happens in some of these areas. And it's kind of like inner city in some ways. And so that's where the marching is. And it's all really close to USF, the University of South Florida, a lot of the stuff that's been going on. And so they had these, at one point they broke into a restaurant and totally destroyed the whole inside. And which was a real shame because apparently the people who own the restaurant, I think they came over from somewhere like Vietnam. And this was their pride and joy. This was everything they've put their whole lives into.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these places that got destroyed are people's entire life. You pour your life into a small business. That's everything that you are, and they just get smashed, and like nobody really thinks about it, but it's unbelievably destructive.
People don't understand, because I do understand this because it did happen to us. We used to have patio furniture stores down in South Florida, and one of them was robbed. And I remember, because there was a guy who came into our store the day before it was robbed who didn't look like he was shopping for patio furniture. He looked very suspicious. Right. And then all of a sudden, the next night, we get totally robbed. And they broke into the store. And because we also had, at that time, this was a long time ago, but we also had pagers and cell phones because we had a little side business on the side of the patio store.
Selling drugs.
Well, that's what they came in to get. They came in to steal all the pagers and cell phones that we had. And it was a lot of money. But they didn't just do it that way. They tore up like my dad's desk. They pull all the papers out of it, threw stuff all over the floor, just completely trashed our place. Wow. And it was, I remember how I felt the next day. I just started crying. I couldn't believe people could do that. And so I could empathize with these business owners because I know how they feel. It's awful. And this thing is, I've had people who are Black Lives Matter supporters and stuff, and they're like, oh, well, it's just property. No, you don't understand.
Yeah,
Those
you
are
don't
people's
understand.
lives.
That's that's entire life has been dedicated to running that business for like north of 10 years. That's
Yeah.
like so insane. And even just property. You know, one thing I saw where they were in Minneapolis, or no, I think it was in Kenosha, where they were going into a parking lot and just smashing people's cars.
Yeah.
You know, how many people do you know? Not that many people can have their car smashed and be okay. You know,
Yeah.
that's
No, I'd lose it. It's just so
well, but
incredibly.
even, I mean, you could probably afford it, but not that many other people that we know could even afford to have a car smashed, you know, smashed up so that it was totally destroyed. You couldn't, we wouldn't be able to survive.
Yeah.
I mean, we have 2 cars, but the one I'm in doesn't really, it's just kind of car in name only at this point. It's sort of functions.
I have, we paid off our cars. And so, I'm really excited about that because I just paid off mine. And so I've had it a little over 5 years, and my husband's had his car 9 years now. And I'm just so happy that they run, and we're not going to, I just refuse to go and get another car because I don't want to have payments. I love having no payments.
Yeah.
It took a long time to pay the thing off. And so,
but most people, I mean, you smash somebody's car, you smash their entire life. Most people don't have enough money to replace a car. I mean, that's a real hardship for a lot of people. And
do you have to buy insurance where you are? Don't you have to buy auto insurance?
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying, like, these are not insignificant things, is my point.
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah. Or even having people march through your neighborhood like they did in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And you get that couple standing out there waving around their guns, which wasn't the brightest move.
Unbelievable. So anyway, okay, so let's go back to Michael Brown.
Okay.
We listening?
No, I wanted to say too, when you mentioned LA, I wanted to say really quickly is that Ben Shapiro just packed up his whole firm and moved to Nashville.
They moved to Nashville. Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, that whole, that's probably a good move.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, it's crazy. Okay, so here we go.
Okay, so I'm happy enough for it to be the case that you take yourself to have strong, independent reasons to believe that God exists outside the context of this argument. But of course, we're not debating those today. So, I mean, I'd happily debate with you most of those arguments because I think I see them all differently to you, but they're not the context of the debate today, not directly at least. Like I said, I'm happy enough that a theist could say, well, even if this argument goes through, I believe in God and it's perfectly rational because I have stronger additional evidence. So if you had
you don't have a jacket
proof,
on.
ontological proof or something, you might just take that.
I left the door unlocked. Okay, bye.
Even though this is evidence that counts against
Don't
it,
leave the house like that
isn't
for
true
long,
anyway.
okay, please?
Reasonable to believe that.
Bye.
I'm fine if you take that to be your position. You have other independent reasons for believing in God. That's fine. Let's just park that for the time being because it's not directly the conversation we're having today. And just on the point about, well, of course, if God doesn't, on the hypothesis that God doesn't exist, that this classical God doesn't exist, there's no problem of evil. The problem of evil is simply just that if there was an agent who had the ability and knew about an evil that was going on and was perfectly moral, the thought then seems to be, well, he would do something about that because there's something intrinsic about being moral, doing the right thing, that you don't just stand by and watch somebody, say, drowning without doing something to try.
What do you think about that argument?
well, it's complicated. Did you hear my wife?
Yeah.
Okay, you heard that.
So
So I'm gonna walk up. It looks like I'm good to go because I think she left.
yeah, and you still got the internet going, so.
Yeah, so I'm gonna walk up to the apartment. Yeah, I don't think the real weakness in the argument is that I don't think it's true. I'll explain it when we get up here. Should I show should we take a look at?
I can hear the ocean.
Yeah, let's take a look. Can you see it?
I can see your apartment. I can't see the ocean though. Oh, is it through that little area?
Through the little.
Yeah, I can see just like sunlight.
Oh, you can't. Here, let me see if I open the gate.
It'd be so nice to live so close to the water like that.
Yeah, it's fun. You don't go on the beach as much as you think you would. Okay, you ready?
Yeah, I'll tell you, when I lived in Boca Raton, I barely ever went to the beach. And it's funny, now that I don't live near the beach, I want to go to the beach more. It's just like when you're not living. But I used to ride my bike up and down A1A on the beach all the time when I lived there.
Yeah, I mean, I do it a decent amount, but just nowhere near as much as you would think.
Yeah, no, the thing is, see, that's the thing is the atheists, they kind of don't want to. They say that if a loving God was there, loving God wouldn't allow certain things to happen. But the thing is that they don't want to give him credit for is he knows what's the outcome for everybody, and he knows how to maximize the potential for us building really strong spirits and getting into heaven.
Right, there's definitely that. But the other thing, all right, let me see. So we're still connected, right? Because I'm in the apartment, and it looks like she's gone. So, seem to be working. The other thing that's like, we don't actually live in a world where it seems like God is indifferent to suffering. If we did, people would go insane. So,
that is another part of the argument that, like, for example, I see it on Twitter all the time where somebody says that their prayers were answered. People pray, and a lot of times it might not seem like your prayers have been answered, but God answers all prayers. He just might not give us the answer we want. But sometimes people feel like some of their calamities or any of the problems that they had, they start praying to God or reading the Bible and that kind of thing, and suddenly things go away.
well, but look at something like, okay, do you remember when Kobe Bryant, when he died in that helicopter crash, right?
Yeah.
Now, why did everybody freak out so much? Everybody, like, collectively, the entire nation went, really, really went like, this is an unbelievable tragedy because it seemed so random to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
That type of stuff happens really rarely. That's why everyone freaked out. Because, like, if it were actually lived in a world where there was no God, and things like that were really random, and the world was completely indifferent to human suffering, Kobe Bryant would have died on Sunday, and you would have woke up the next morning, and some other famous person would have died randomly, and then that night somebody else would have died, and everybody would, like, you wouldn't be able to live in the world because things would be happening actually randomly for no particular rhyme or reason, and you wouldn't be able to handle it emotionally. Like, think about how hard that was for people to process. And why was it so hard for them to process? Because it seemed so random. That type of stuff happens really rarely. Even you're like, when you hear about something random, you go like, okay, well, what happened that, like, you start looking for sort of a justification or a cause. I don't know if I'm completely making sense. It's hard to explain.
No, you do, because it's just like what happened when a long time ago, I know you know JFK Jr. and his wife, when they were flying in a plane and the plane went down, or a John Denver flying in a plane and the plane goes down, or the Big Bopper, same thing. I mean, all these people die in these plane crashes, but it's always really little planes, but it's still something that you don't expect, especially because John Denver wrote a song called Leaving on a Jet Plane.
Oh, wow. Literally, I'm literally leaving on a jet plane. Literally. Gonna die that way.
Yeah, that's what I'm like. I can't even believe he wrote that song, and then that happens to him. But it's. I mean, these are all celebrities, and they're always small planes. I know are quite risky, obviously.
Right, but that's exactly what I mean. Okay, so you look for the reason why it happened with Kobe Bryant, and it was some sort of malfunction in the mechanics or like the visibility or something like that. Mm-hmm. So you understand why it happens, but the reason why people freak out is because it seems so completely random. If there were actually a completely random suffering in the world, like the next morning, a senator would be randomly killed in a car crash. The next day, another famous, this stuff doesn't happen. It happens so much less infrequently than people think. If it were actually a world with no sovereign agent overwatching it, and it was a world completely indifferent to human suffering, stuff like that would happen all the time. Because there's chances of accidents and destruction,
Well,
Do-
I look at my own situation. I was in a lot of car accidents, and I was in 2 totals. I totaled my Volkswagen and I totaled my parents' station wagon, and I got in 3 other car accidents besides that. And this is all before the age of 23. And it's like, how did I survive? How is it
Right.
possible? You know, and one time I was driving in Mexico. This is not even a good story. My husband's crazy. He's like, he can't even believe I did this. But I was down in Mexico and I was taking a taxi from an airport to a resort, and I was by myself with the taxi driver. And suddenly this big armed man in the middle of the road steps out into the road, waves at the taxi driver. The taxi driver stops. They start speaking really fast in Spanish, and I can't understand what they're saying.
What the hell? Are you serious?
Yeah. And then all of a sudden the driver kept going. Like, yeah, no, I'm totally serious. And I made the boyfriend, because I was going to see a boyfriend, I made him drive me back to the airport at that time. I'm like, coming with me, man. You are not putting me in a taxi alone. So,
When the guy slowed down and you saw the armed man, how did you feel?
I was flipped out. I was sitting in the back like,
You must have been terrified. Do you know what that was all about? Did you ever
no,
find
I
out?
never found out. I mean, I asked the guy, he just is kind of like, oh, no worries, no worries.
No, I was
Like,
going to sell you to white slavery. No big deal.
yeah, that's the thing. I was like,
he's like, I'll give you 6,000 pesos for it. It's like, that's not
That's
enough.
you don't even know. So I was flipped out, but that's not even the worst story. So I already mentioned 5 car crashes. I'm mentioning these because somehow I've escaped, and like I think God does help. I mean, it's not somebody's going to get on here and say, "Well, how come He helped you and He didn't help someone?" Yeah, but just there was another time when I was at a club.
But just the fact that they say that, they go, "How come God helped you?" But here's the evil anomaly. That's the real argument. And we can't necessarily make sense of the evil anomaly, but the evil anomaly is an anomaly. It's not something that happens enough that all of us would be collectively losing our mind. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Just how the odds of people having car crashes and falling down a flight of stairs and dying, and the odds of that are so astronomically high that like the evil anomaly wouldn't be an anomaly.
yeah.
The problem of evil wouldn't be a problem. You'd recognize that life was evil because you'd be overrun with evil all the time. I mean, that's how I see it. But I'm not sure.
No,
I'm
I think
saying
so.
this
I
well
think
enough
that
to make sense. But
see, even deconverted Dan, even that guy, he said
Yeah.
that he had this experience. Wait, was he the one who had it? Yeah, he had an experience where he felt like God was telling him not to go down this one particular alley, and he went down it anyway, and these people beat him up. And that was before he decided he didn't believe in God.
That's a huge thing with me. That's the small voice. Now, atheists had experiences like that. Everybody has experiences like why most people believe in God, because they have that still small voice experience, which you can actually put to, your subconscious mind. It doesn't necessarily mean God. You just experience it as like a third party going like, don't do this, don't go across the street. But almost nobody disregards that voice.
Yeah.
He's like one of the rare few. Like I had voice moments like that where I felt like, don't go any further with this or you're in trouble. Before I believed in God. That like writing on the wall experience. That's common. That's why so many people believe in God, because they have experiences like that all the time. But they heed those voices. They don't disregard them. Even atheists, you're an idiot to disregard that voice. Go ahead. What was the
Yeah,
better
no,
story?
I totally agree with you. Well, there was the other one where Wendy McClellan, she was on my channel too, and she's an atheist. She had the voice say like something like turn off the highway here and go to this rest stop, and whatever happened, she just missed some major crash. Like there was a big, huge crash, and I think that was how it worked with her, and she missed it because this little voice told her to get off the highway.
And she's an atheist?
Yeah. That's
so
the thing.
how does she reconcile that voice?
She figures she must have been.
But he saved my life.
Yeah, she must have been imagining, or it must have been her talking to herself, or something like that, or just sensing it herself. So
well, it could easily be. I mean, I'm not definitely saying these things are proof of God, but if you disregard that voice, you're an idiot.
I agree.
An idiot, because if it's not God actually talking to you, then it is your subconscious mind giving you some powerful warning. Don't go in this room. Something terrible. And most people don't go in the room and experience something terrible. But if it's not God, prayer gets you more in touch with that voice anyways, and cultivating a Christian type of, not necessarily ascetic lifestyle, but lifestyle that's more focused on, cultivating a relationship with God or prayer life or things like that, gets you more in touch with that survival voice anyways, even if it isn't God. Nobody disregards that voice and has a successful life or lives to tell about it. People just don't, even an atheist doesn't do stuff that, like, they get this really, really powerful sense, don't go in this building, and then go in the building. Well, there's no God, so who cares what my powerful sense says? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. No, my friend, my Jewish friend, she always calls it her little spidey sense.
Right. I mean, I had two experiences like that in drugs, where I don't even know if I should tell these stories. Wow, they'll freak you out. But one there was this one dude who I met in AA who I never wanted to. Actually, I won't tell the story. I'll tell it later. I'll tell it some other time. I'll tell it off camera.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. But that's the thing is a lot of people have these experiences. And the other one, I don't know if I've told you this before, but the other one was, there was a guy in that, I had a Volkswagen, like I mentioned before I totaled it. I was meeting up with friends at this late night bar, and we were going from one bar to another, and I had to get changed. This was when I was I was like, how old was I? I was probably like 21 and or 22, something like that. I was really young. I just got out of college. And so I remember I had to go put in, they didn't allow jeans. So I ran home to change my pants, and I went back to the bar to meet my friends. And I got out of my car and I walked up to the door, and there was this long line. And I thought, oh, you know what? This isn't even worth it. I'm not waiting in that line. So I went to get back in my car. And as I get in there, I have like one leg still out the front door. I'm sitting in the front seat, and I look down on the floor, and there's glass all over the place. And I'm thinking,
this is the guy in the car.
Yeah, freaking guy sitting in the back. He grabbed my head and pinned me back. And I was trying to figure out, how in the world am I going to get out of here and buy some time? And so I just like took every little piece of energy I had and tore away from that guy and started screaming and running into the parking lot. And I found out who the guy was. He ended up being a serial killer who raped and murdered a bunch of people. And he's got 4 life terms right now.
Wow.
Because I saw what he looked like, and he drove a silver Porsche. And I always remembered he looked like Alan Stanwyck on Fletch. And so he ended up, I told my friend about it. And she's like, oh my gosh, that's David Miller. She goes, haven't you heard about him? He's the black sheep of the family. This thing. So anyway, but I somehow got away, thankfully.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's and the other weird thing, the pastor on the plane, that I always talk about, this pastor on the plane who introduced me to C.S. Lewis and Isaiah 53. His name's David Miller too.
What? Are you serious?
Yeah. So the worst person in my life and like one of the best people have the same name.
Wow, that's really weird.
I know.
They're both named David Miller.
Yeah, and they both go by David, not Dave.
Wow.
Which I think is pretty crazy.
So anyways, let's go back to the thing, and then we'll
Okay. I probably can go for about 10 more minutes, and then I probably have to.
Oh, that's it? All right.
Cut out.
Because
Yeah.
I'm good. My wife left, but I seem to have fine connections. So.
Yeah, you do have a good connection now. Okay, here we go.
And help them. And yet it sort of seems like there's lots of times where people just suffer. And there's a problem, which is merely a problem for that hypothesis of there being a really powerful, perfectly good person who knows about it, who's not doing anything. So of course, if you on the hypothesis that there's nobody there, that problem doesn't exist. Now you might say, well, suffering is still kind of problematic. I mean, it's difficult to, obviously it's difficult to experience suffering. It's something we all have to deal with in our lives or whatever. But the problem of evil, this problem here, isn't a problem if God doesn't exist. Of course, it's only a problem between the clash between the evil and that hypothesis that God exists. That's the problem. So of course it doesn't exist.
See, I don't see how you can even say evil. Like, what is evil? You know what I'm saying? What is evil? I mean, this is just if there's no God and there's no guide to what evil is and what love is, it's all just a life of indifference.
Well, there's no real like moral ontology. So it's like, a lion eats a zebra. It's an amoral action. It's not an evil act. And then you could probably make that's how a lot of people go after this with atheists is, there's one guy who has a decent moral argument from an atheist point of view who debated William Lane Craig. I think his name is Eric Mollenberger or something like that, where he has a pretty decent moral ontology or justification as an atheist. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely one of the ways to go about this is like, why does anybody even care? You know, a lot of atheists object to that argument though.
Yeah, I'm trying to get back to the right page. Okay. No, that's the thing. Just like you said before, if you're like, okay, if a shark forcibly copulates with, you know, or whatever it is, if an animal forcibly copulates with another animal or something like that, you don't say, oh, that's so immoral. That's just evil. You don't say that because it's animal world.
Right.
The animal steals from another animal. Because there's no sense of morality.
There's
and so
no moral compass whatsoever. So it's totally amoral. And like that's one of the arguments that Christians try to make is that without God, then there's no moral justification whatsoever. But I'm always interested in atheists trying to make moral arguments because I think I don't know. There's a lot to it. It gets really complicated. But the moral justification from this one guy who debated William Lane Craig on this subject. He kind of likens it to a responsibility, like of an epistemological responsibility. Like if you can perceive it, then you are obligated to do something about it. I'm not sure if I'm saying it quite right, but like if you're someone next to you, hand is on fire, you have a moral obligation to help them, help them because you can perceive what's happening. It's kind of rooted in empathy, I guess, but it's a little bit more sophisticated than that.
But it's like, who's the enforcement?
Right. There is no enforcement mechanism for sure. But he's arguing that there's an obligation there. But
yeah, we do have obligations. So we do have.
He's trying to. You should watch that debate. It's between William Lane Craig and him.
Yeah, I will. That sounds good. Yeah, so that's that. See what they do. What a lot of them do, like what Paula Gia does, and Shannon Q, and Steve McRae. And this all came from, a lot of it came from Ben.
Steve McRae.
Yeah, Steve McRae. These objective moral duties. Like they'll admit that we have objective moral duties, but then they'll say it's grounded in consequentialism, meaning that we have this shared desire for certain consequences to maximize our well-being. And therefore, because humans all have this shared desire, that must necessarily be the grounding rather than God. And I don't think that makes any sense. It's circular. It's like your desire. And then not only that, but not everybody even shares that desire.
Right. It's not a terrible argument, though. I'm kind of interested in atheists circling the square without God, because we know that atheists can actually do good things, and act morally in the world, even though they're atheists. So it would actually, I don't know. It's complicated. It's hard to explain where I'm going with this, but ultimately I kind of want atheists to get a good moral justification for their position without God, because I think ultimately that would help us.
Yeah, we want them to be moral.
Then they would stop eating babies, stop doing so many. Then JB would stop being so evil all the time.
JB. Right now we got Joe Tink, and that is not. I was wrong about which Joe Tink that is. That is he's a UK one, and he says the UK is in lockdown till December, till the 2nd of December.
Wow.
That would stink, man. That would be awful. And Mr. Parker, he says, this kind of sounds like God allows good people to die because he determines it's his time, but homophobic people get to live longer than good people.
Homophobic?
Mr.
Where did
Parker.
that come from?
We just didn't say anything about that today. So, no, I do think that there's a lot of different arguments. In fact, I argued, what's the guy, Prophet of Zod? Actually, I argued with him on that whole thing too, with this consequentialism.
Oh, did you really? Was he a moral subjectivist?
No, he's a moral objectivist. And that's actually hard to argue with people who take this position that our desire and our grounding are the same thing. Because I see that as I see the desire and the grounding as both dependent and independent variables. So I can't put them together and say they're the same thing. Like I look at it as a regression equation. And so it's our desire, our goals. They said we have shared goals, those sorts of things.
Well,
therefore,
it makes
that
sense.
must be
It just doesn't come up. It just comes up a little short in terms of a total justification. but then they'll say the same thing about, you know, God. That it definitely makes sense, and I don't mind it. I'm kind of on board with some aspects of it. Like Matt Dillahunty has the chessboard analogy. Like there's a couple of things about it that I never quite get. Like they say that the goal, the consequentialist goal, is subjective. Well-being of the person and the society at large doesn't strike me as subjective. It strikes me as the goal. You know, I never understand why they say that. But then to maximize well-being for an individual, yeah, there's common sense argument to be made there that like you have certain principles, ethics, values that are going to help someone succeed and be a better, more upright and functioning member of society than others. That's kind of obvious. They line up with Christian values. So I think it's in our interest to let them circle the square without God. You know
what they try to do though is Matt, what Matt always does is he says, well, if we can just sit down and discuss that, like he was talking about Hitler. He's talking about how if Hitler would just come to the agreement that we don't have, you know, because Hitler's idea of well-being is not our idea of well-being. And so Matt's always saying, if we can just sit down in agreement, well, people don't sit down and come to agreements on everything in every country. We've got a lot of dictators out there and crazy people.
Right, but he probably means more like the rule of law and like agreement as a collective society. So like Hitler wouldn't include obvious certain types of people in his well-being collective. You know, he might agree with some of the same things if you're just talking about Germans versus, you know, Jews, gypsies, gays. But within the context of German society, he might agree that these are the right. You know, there's definitely objective morals. That's the only point that I'm making. And you can be an atheist and recognize that too. And the more light you can bring to the subject, the more that ultimately always helps us, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think so too.
Because if atheists agree that like well-being and then how you define it for the collective group of people, it's going to line up with a lot of what Christian ethics is, you know, at least according to Christianity, like, you know, imitate me as I imitate Christ type ethics, which means be more like humble, patient, kind, long-suffering, you know, those type of things. Virtue ethics.
Yeah. This is kind of, as I was thinking about Hitler, I started thinking about the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un. Have you ever seen any documentaries on that? North Korea? No. You have to watch this one. There's one, you can even find it just, if you just type in on your phone, just type in type in Lisa Ling, L-I-N-G.
Oh, I know her. She used to be on like CNN. I remember her.
Yeah. She daringly, went over there and did a documentary.
Right.
And you won't even believe it. Like, it's crazy that she did that because, I mean, she could have been killed. She could have been thrown in jail because she was she was pretending she was somebody she really wasn't. She was traveling with the doctor, and she got in there because the doctor was going to go help some people to operate on their eyes if they had cataracts and do things like that out of just his own generosity. And so she traveled with them, and she said these North Koreans are following them around everywhere they went. They told her she's the only American that they've allowed in the country. And she went in and she talked to people. And the reason why I found this fascinating is because the people in these towns are worshiping Kim Jong-un like he is a god. You wouldn't believe it. They have, like, she went into one person's house, and the only picture they had in the whole room was one of Kim Jong-un on the wall.
Wow.
It's crazy. You have to see that documentary.
It's genuine. Is it genuine to the people?
It looks like they're genuine. I mean, or they're really good fakers. So
God, how on earth does that happen? So it's genuine to them, even though
it looks like it is.
So
well, they might be too scared not to make it genuine. And you know, since this is coming from the grandfather, so it could have been maybe.
If you ever go look at, you don't even need to, like, if you go look at old footage of the Hitler rallies and stuff, there was a lot of worship there, and it was genuine. I mean, you could tell. You can see it in their faces and like the ecstasy and, you know, so.
Well, it's like the Trump rallies. Look at the people who go to those. Like, look at this today. There's like a 1 million man march right now going on in DC. These people are wearing Trump hats. I mean, they love Trump, like really love him in a way that's, I think, kind of eerie. It's like, I mean, I don't care who you vote for or whatever. It's just I don't feel that kind of love for a political leader. I just don't.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. But did you see that big rally today?
Yes, the Million MAGA March.
Yeah, it's really unbelievable. So now my husband's a huge Trump fan, so I'll just say that. So, but we'll see. It looks like Trump isn't going to win after all. So I don't think he can pull it off right now, but who knows? I know he still thinks he can. So we shall see.
Well, that's ultimately what the rally's about, is stop the steal rally. That's a big part of it.
Yeah. Stop. And if there is some legitimate stealing, I mean, we do have to root that out. So definitely need to do a little bit of that. Actually, I should probably get going now because I got to go down there and make dinner and make sure everybody's okay.
All right, you want to close us out? All right, that's fine. Yeah, we can wrap it up. How long did we go for? Hour and a half?
That's pretty good.
we got how much of the debate did we actually analyze? 10 minutes? Not even.
We did better than we did in the Apologia debate. I think we had to go 2 nights for that one.
Yeah, well, we'll have to do this. We'll do this one again, and we'll go.
Yeah.
We'll come back to this. On this channel, we'll do it again, but more thorough.
Sounds good.
All right, cool. So there you have it, kids. We did our expert analysis as usual. Stephanie and I hungrily dived into this debate with an atheist and a Christian on the problem of evil, and dare I say, we nailed it. I mean, we really gave you a lot of stuff to think about with this particular debate. Really thoroughly analyzed it, covered it, So if you want to, I don't know what you want to do with this video. If you want to, post it somewhere really important to yourself and keep it near and dear to your heart, you might want to do such. But as for that, we are now going to sign off for today. That is all.
I want to say something really quick before we do. Cafe, Kafei says, to you've got to invite me to the next one.
Yeah, dude. Actually, I also want to interview you. Cafe is the resident perennialist, or one of the resident perennialists. We got another one, Cafe Layman.
Nice.
So,
Okay. So Cafe, that's in the plan. We'll figure it out maybe in the next week or so.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So.
All right, cool. Sounds good.
So we'll end the broadcast.